Hello everyone! For the first time in forever, I'm doing another quick casual video. I am still working on my usual long-form stuff, and I thank you all for your patience. But, I'm starting to think that I may be one of those YouTubers who just uploads whenever. That is to say, if I ever make any money off this platform, it won't be because I start making videos full-time. It'll be because, once in a blue moon, I make a random video that hits 1 million views. Here's hoping. Anyway, today's video is a response to a recent upload from Judgmental Critter, talking about character color in RWBY, particularly Weiss's outfits becoming less and less white over time, and why that might be. If you've watched a lot of Critter's videos in the past, as I have, you're probably already familiar with most of the talking points in the video. Heck, watching it actually made me feel nostalgic for the RWBYtuber heyday. Arguing about Weiss's terrible outfits really takes me back. Besides that, though, it's nice to hear a breakdown of fan theories that supposedly explain the narrative reasons why Weiss's designs have become so radically different and arguably worse. Personally, I don't like analyzing RT's decision-making in that way. I think the narrative of RWBY is largely an afterthought, and anything that seems to enhance it or follow it most likely has a much more meta, much more shallow reason to exist. More on that later. But because I don't like doing this kind of analysis, it's very informative and interesting to hear someone else do it for me, and give some insight into how RWBY's audience thinks. If that sounds interesting to you, click the link in the description and check out the video, and then come on back to hear my take on it. So I pretty much agree with the larger conclusions made by the video. A lot of the symbolic explanations people come up with for the girl's design changes aren't good and don't stand up to scrutiny, especially across volumes. That one sentence pretty much describes everything in RWBY. I just want to address some smaller things in the video that stuck out to me. So let's start with... So, Yang and RWBY just got a brief mention in the video. RWBY in particular never gets many complaints when it comes to color representation, no matter how bad her outfits look. It seems that Red Riding Hood's Red Riding Hood is essentially a cheat code that protects her from this kind of criticism. Not so for Goldilocks' Golden Locks, unfortunately. Yang honestly deserves a video of her own on how her designs were routinely butchered and sabotaged from day one, and if Critter ever does one, I will be there. But for now, all we got was a nod to the good old Yang doesn't wear enough yellow argument. Part of me does not want to get into this debate again, but part of me kind of does want to go into it again, because every time I do, there always seems to be a new angle in it that I never considered before. So here we go. So Critter brings up the Hunter outfit as an example of a great outfit that Yang wears that features lots of yellow. I agree that it is a great outfit that showcases how good she looks in yellow. However, I don't think this is that much closer to yellow than the brown and tan and gold accents she usually wears. She does have more obvious yellow cuffs on her sleeves, but this main section of color on her torso doesn't really read as yellow. At best, it's beige. Heck, when I first saw it, I just thought it was white, and please comment down below if you thought the same, because it makes me feel crazy when people talk about this outfit like it's a banana suit or something. This feels like yellow in the same way sparkling water drinks supposedly taste like fruit. Now, my personal take is that this makes sense, because Yang's voluminous yellow hair is an important part of her character design, and covering her in similar yellows would drown it out and make it less noticeable. It is, in fact, good design philosophy to minimize the use of yellow on her outfits, and lean on versions of yellow that are either very dark, like all her browns, or very light, like this off-white color. That way you can use those near yellows to contrast with her hair, while keeping her outfit feeling warm and complementary. Because apparently, the alternative would be to have her look like this. These are characters that people often bring up when talking about putting Yang in more yellow, and I don't think they're bad designs. In fact, I think they're all excellent. These characters look great. The problem is that they are not Yang's contemporaries. They are not styled like Yang, and most of the time they don't even share her personality. Their designs are appropriate for them and the worlds they live in, not necessarily for Yang and the world of Remnant. Like, does this look normal to you? Because it shouldn't. But let's break it down. So, 90% of these characters are magical girls who are supposed to look cute, innocent, and fantastical in a way that Yang is not. And the key word there is fantastical. It is not normal to have an outfit that is almost all one color. Doing this to a character makes them feel surreal and otherworldly in a way that the audience will immediately pick up on, even if they don't realize it, making it a great strategy when designing a fantasy magical girl character who is supposed to read that way. Ruby's original design philosophy, on the other hand, was clearly an anime-inspired hyper-urban aesthetic, mixing normal modern clothes with elements from prominent fashion subcultures and unique details. A character like Yang should not feel like she's from a magical fantasy world. She should feel like she's from a version of our world that's just a little more interesting. And just because the showrunners forgot about that doesn't mean we have to. Putting Yang in a color scheme like this may look nice, but it won't look fitting for the world or for her personality. Yang is a grounded character. She's supposedly the most down-to-earth and normal girl in the main cast. So again, it is good design philosophy to make her clothes look practical and realistic, to lean on color schemes that normal urban people tend to wear. More brown and black, and less highlighter yellow and neon red. Even the hunter outfit, which supposedly proves that Yang looks best in yellow, is still mostly black. You may not want Yang to wear things like this, but from a character designer's perspective, thinking about the context in which she exists and how the audience should perceive her, it makes sense that she does. Now, am I saying that the idea of Yang wearing more yellow is inherently stupid and that I've just succeeded in proving it wrong? No, actually. I myself have done a mostly yellow Yang design, putting her in way more yellow than she has ever worn in the show, and doing it successfully, if I do say so myself. But it took me a long time to come up with this design, because it's not easy to do, and I think the fact that people keep suggesting design inspirations that don't make sense is a testament to the complexity of the issue that keeps getting overlooked. Like, if your argument is that Yang needs to wear more yellow because Mami Tomoe, a completely different character from an anime with a completely different art style, looks perfectly fine, you're not really thinking about how to make Yang look good, you're just blindly trying to win an internet argument. Find some yellow gacha girls from an urban fantasy game who actually match Yang's aesthetic, and then you'll be onto something. Like, I would love for people to actually see Yang in yellow as the character design challenge that it is, and make a genuine effort to overcome it, rather than dressing her up as Alex from Totally Spies just to prove they can. So Blake got a little more spotlight in the video, going into how the white overtaking the black in her color scheme may have reflected the big dramatic shifts in her character. And believe it or not, I actually agree with this, but not in the way you might think. I think the white does not reflect the way Blake changed throughout the narrative, but instead reflects the way the writers and showrunners changed the way they thought about her. To be blunt, they kinda just forgot about the version of Blake that wore mostly black, and made up a new one who, at this moment in time, wears mostly white. I have spoken about Blake's deterioration as a character before. Simply put, Blake used to fill the emo girl archetype. She was the edgy member of the team, criticizing society, and willing to do more unsavory things in the name of justice, up to and including hurting herself in pursuit of her ideals. Now, she is Yang's mousy girlfriend. She's quiet, she likes books, and she doesn't like when people are mean. That's it. Everything else was either forgotten or purposely ripped out of the character to make the writing easier. And as this was happening, as Blake gradually lost all the personality traits that made her character meaningful, she also lost the dominant black in her color scheme, and I don't think that's a coincidence. There is no reason for the showrunners to dress her like an emo girl when she's not emo anymore. Now, some people seem to see this as normal. Like, isn't it a good thing that she's not emo anymore? That's called positive character development. It means she's become a better person. And I really don't like that argument. First of all, as viewers of fiction, we really need to deconstruct this lingering stereotype that people who wear black clothes and lean into this kind of goth alternative look have something wrong with them and must inevitably be fixed. I am a person who wears a lot of black clothing. I wear black boots, I paint my nails black, I even wear spikes and chains sometimes. It's not because I'm a cartoon villain. It's also not because I'm socially awkward and insecure. I've actually leaned harder into this aesthetic as I've grown up and become more confident. Believe it or not, it actually takes a lot of self-confidence to be able to walk into a supermarket in a biker jacket and fishnet gloves. It means you're comfortable being stared at by all the people wearing normal t-shirts and leggings. So yeah, please let the myth die. It is 100% possible for Blake to be happy, comfortable, and loved by her friends while still looking like an emo girl. Second of all, call me crazy, but there's also nothing wrong with her still being an emo girl. Not only do we need to deconstruct the idea that a happy, well-adjusted person looks a certain way, we also need to deconstruct the idea that they must act a certain way. There was nothing wrong with Blake being passionate and driven. I'd even argue there's nothing wrong with her being demanding and critical, considering that Remnant is canonically a harsh and difficult world to live in. It's not a bad thing for there to be a team member who calls out the BS, who doesn't back down, sometimes goes too far because of how much she cares. Not only does it make for a more entertaining story, it lends diversity to the cast and their interactions that's just missing now. Why am I supposed to be glad that Blake is always nice and always calm and never says anything even slightly disruptive? As the protagonist of an action drama series? If that's supposed to be positive character development, I'd rather have the negative. All that is to say, I think Blake's current design fits perfectly for a character who used to be an edgy badass and now has no discernible identity. Of course her character color should get lost in all these huge sections of purple and white, and technically not even be present because this isn't actually black, it's purple black. Cinder wears black. Ruby wears black. Blake wears this purpley off black, and even her hair is more gray than black. For me, this is a symbol of no one on the production staff knowing who she's supposed to be anymore. And I wish I was joking. This feels like a joke, but I'm really not. It genuinely makes sense in my head. Let me know if you agree, I guess. And now, for the actual focus of the video. As I said before, I agree with pretty much everything said about Weiss's designs in Judgmental Critters video, although my personal takes on those observations are slightly different. Like, I think it's true that Weiss keeps getting mistakenly put into color schemes that represent the protagonist's Atlesian adversaries. I don't think it's on purpose, I do think it's just an unfortunate mistake the visual team keeps repeating because they refuse to pay attention. However, I think they're not paying attention to this issue because they're too busy paying attention to something else. And that is using Weiss as a sort of brand ambassador for the Kingdom of Atlas. From the very first volume, I think that was one of the core aspects of Weiss's character concept. Not just to be a character, but to be a vehicle for world building. To teach the audience about Atlas and set the entire kingdom up as a future antagonist. Yang and Ruby don't teach us about Patch or Veil. Blake definitely doesn't teach us about Menagerie, likely because it didn't exist until Volume 4. But Weiss teaches us tons of stuff about Atlas's politics and upper-class culture and the Schnee Dust Company, even going as far as literally explaining these things to the characters around her. Weiss is a window into Atlas. Despite being characterized as a rebel, she is used in the narrative as a representative of that kingdom and everything it entails. And when you think of her outfit changes in that light, they make a lot more sense. She was originally put in these mostly white outfits because, at the time, Atlas was also represented by the color white. Then when she got back home, she was put in these soft blues to match the blue interior of the Schnee Mansion, the first location in Atlas we were actually shown. You could also argue that she was meant to match the color schemes of her mother and brother, to unify them as victims under Jacques, the only one still maintaining white as his signature color. Then that blue became dull gray because this company is allergic to visual direction, but after that, when we returned to Atlas to finally fulfill the promise of its villainy, they once again put Weiss in colors representing what we were going to see in the kingdom. Ironwood's color scheme suddenly got much brighter and more eye-catching, with these heroic blues and reds marking him as a much more active, important character. The Aesop's got color schemes to mirror his, and Weiss also got a color scheme to mirror his. I don't think it's a coincidence that Atlas's brand ambassador got her most obnoxiously loud, high-contrast colors during the volumes when Atlas became relevant to the plot. You could even argue that this was overcompensating for her own lack of activity in the plot. Like, sure, maybe she can't fulfill her role as a lead character by actually leading the story, but she can still fulfill her role as a representative by sauntering around looking like a patriotic Atlas princess. Now, I have no proof of any of this. It's all just my observations and theory, and even if it turned out to be true, I still don't think it was intentional. I think it's more like the showrunners see Weiss and Atlas as one and the same, so why shouldn't they look alike? Without realizing that by making pretty much everyone in Atlas villains, they're constantly making Weiss look like she's aligned with villainy. But if you agree with this, or if you have another theory that you think explains these correlations, feel free to share in the comments. Now, the last thing I'd like to address here is just something that inspired me. When Critter brought up the idea of Weiss being like a blank canvas, explaining how the showrunners could have used her secondary colors to show how her friends impacted her over the years, like paint being added to a white background. The animation she did for it was really cute, and the idea behind it inspired me to do yet another Ruby design collection. So, without any further ado, welcome to the Blank Canvas collection. This is a series of original Weiss outfits using both secondary colors and design aesthetics to imply connections to the other members of Team Ruby. We'll start with the Bloodstain outfit, using red as a secondary color to reference Ruby. We also have the capelet and hood, sheer tights, and cross earrings as references in the construction. I think this outfit has an innocent vibe that really feels reminiscent of Ruby, and since red was already a prominent secondary color in Weiss's original outfit, it looks very natural on her. Next up, the Sun Bleach outfit, using yellow as a secondary color to reference Yang, along with the leather jacket, short leggings, and very low neckline. This outfit is probably the furthest away from Weiss's usual attire, with a focus on sturdy, modern clothing with an uncomplicated silhouette. I tried to use a more golden shade of yellow in thin sections to accent the white. I think this feels very classy and fitting for the rich brat side of Weiss's personality. Next is the Ink Blot outfit, using black as a secondary color to reference Blake. It's basically a remixed version of Blake's original outfit, with the sections of color shuffled around to put more emphasis on the white. The construction is a lot simpler though. It's basically just an off-the-shoulder jacket over a white mini dress, streamlining the fancy rebel outfit into something a bit more reminiscent of mainstream high fashion, something Weiss might come across while flipping through a magazine. And yet, I think it manages to maintain that striking yet understated look that Blake's better outfits are known for. Finally, we have the pièce de résistance, the Masterpiece outfit, a slight Volume 1 Weiss redesign with a color scheme representing all of Team Ruby. As you can see, I've been coloring it throughout the video, so here's the finished version in all its glory. The biggest change here is the black bolero jacket, followed by the ribbons around her waist and the gold brooch on her chest. And as I usually do when I craft fully actualized Weiss designs, I removed her crown, replacing it with an artfully arranged black ribbon. And speaking of the black ribbon, I think a lot of my fully actualized Weiss designs end up accidentally referencing Blake in some way. For instance, this one I did for the Next Steps collection that essentially gives her the same color scheme. But I embrace that wholeheartedly. Sure, the real reason they look like this is because black and white famously go well together, cool purple is a good alternative to her usual blue, and ribbons help with her fancy rich girl aesthetic, especially in place of the crown. But also, I can't think of a better visual indicator of personal growth than to see Weiss incorporating design elements from a character she used to discriminate against. Like, the design kind of just spells itself out for you, in a good way. Another thing I like about this outfit in particular is that it does something that Yang outfits usually do, and makes her look like a representative of the title team, the glue that connects everyone together. And you might not think that's a fitting role for Weiss, especially now that she is currently the team's occasionally funny but mostly useless background entity. Because, as all good writers know, if she's not the main character and she can't be used for shipping, she might as well not exist, so you can just go ahead and treat her like she doesn't. But in the brief interim period after she finished her family drama arc, but before she became a hollowed out shell, a lot of people started to see her as the team mom, using her newfound stability and wisdom to support Ruby and help Blake and Yang get through their pre-relationship issues. Now, I never really agreed with this viewpoint. First of all, I'm not a fan of female characters immediately being shoved into the maternal role as soon as they show an inkling of kindness and consideration for their friends. And second of all, she didn't really spend a lot of time doing this. I think 90% of that characterization came from this one scene in Volume 5. But it was something, and if the writers had actually leaned into it, we could have had a situation where an outfit like the Masterpiece might have made sense for Weiss in the later volumes. As Yang lost her role as the actual team mom by devolving into a hyper-aggressive caricature of herself, Weiss could have stepped up to fill it. But instead, it seems the writers learned the wrong lesson from this scene, if anything, and sought to use Weiss's special moments to remind the audience that she's a good person now, not to show that she cares for the people around her. Like, to the point where she spent all of Volume 7 practically saying, "I'm a good person now," straight into the camera. It got really bad. With the possible exception of her conversation with Willow, I think that was the beginning of the end for our Ice Queen. In a better world, I think it would have been nice to see a version of Weiss who truly fulfilled her promise to be the best teammate ever, not just to Ruby, but to all the girls. One who changed as a person not just to maintain the moral high ground, but because she has genuinely been impacted by her interactions with her found family. She came to Beacon as a blank canvas, and the friends she made left their marks on her and helped make her a work of art. Thanks so much for watching, like, subscribe, whatever, and check out my Coffee page gallery to see the finished pictures in these videos. Till next time!